Clarence damn Thomas. Once again, proving that Ginny Thomas actually runs the US Supreme Court. He has done something that is so extreme. Even those that once supported Clarence Thomas are like, damn, Clarence. Clarence Thomas has signed an administrative order that temporarily stops Lindsey Graham, United States Senator, from testifying before the special purpose grand jury out of the state of Georgia. Isn't this something? So let me provide the irony and the background to what has now happened. Let's put up their pictures. We have the senator and we have Raffensperger. Raffensperger is the chief elections officer for the state of Georgia. Justice Thomas has briefly froze an order calling Senator Lindsey Graham, calling on him to testify in this probe in Georgia. The South Carolina senator was reportedly one of the lawmakers who pressured Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to question absentee ballots. The top election official told the Washington Post this entire story in November of 2020. He laid it all out. When this investigation started, I said on day one, if you investigate Donald Trump for the call we have on record, you have to also investigate Lindsey Graham for the call Raffensperger says also happened. Lindsey Graham may have even been more egregious in his direct proclamation to make a sitting official change the outcome of an election. A grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, subpoenaed Graham for testimony in their probe, prompting the South Carolina lawmaker to ask the Supreme Court in an emergency application last week to block the subpoena. Now, some people are questioning, how does this protocol work? You may say, well, I thought the Supreme Court decided on things as a collective body. How is it that Clarence Thomas has enough authority to grant this stay? Here's why. Clarence Thomas is able, by way of designation, to handle emergency orders out of the state of Georgia. And he can do or create what's called an administrative ruling, which provides a temporary freeze in whatever federal judicial order exists. Remember, a federal court has already ruled days ago that Senator Lindsey Graham must testify based on the rules that are provided in the law. But Clarence Thomas, in complete violation of protocol, complete violation of rule of law, has decided to grant this stay. Now, according to legal experts, this will only last temporarily. That's what they say. That's what they're saying, that this will eventually run its course. We shall see. So here's what Lindsey Graham's lawyer wrote in the application, and I quote, "Without a stay, Senator Lindsey Graham will soon be questioned by a local Georgia prosecutor and her ad hoc investigative body about his protected speech or debate related to the 2020 election. This will occur despite the Constitution's command that senators shall not be questioned about any speech or debate." Let me be very clear, the attorney is wrong. Clarence Thomas knows this attorney is wrong. The US Constitution does protect senators, members of Congress, from civil liability from what they say on the floor of the Congress. They cannot be sued. They have immunity for these things. They also have immunity from certain speeches, public in nature, that are in fact also perhaps political. They receive a level of leeway, so to speak. And they also have this amazing power during legislative session where if they are headed to vote, they cannot be arrested. Now they can be arrested afterwards. So these are constitutional dynamics. They have been interpreted by courts for years. But none of this covers a private conversation. Let me explain it this way. It's called the speech and debate clause of the Constitution. Was Lindsey Graham engaged in a speech? Was he engaged in a debate? I rest my case, Your Honor. All right, Thomas on Monday was granted an administrative stay likely to give justices in the nation's top court more time to consider the senator's emergency request to block his testimony before the Georgia County grand jury. The justice acted alone in this temporary order because he has jurisdiction over the lower court that issued the original subpoena. That court is part of the circuit out of Georgia. But last week's appeal to the Supreme Court wasn't Graham's first attempt to avoid testifying before this Atlanta grand jury. Earlier this year, Graham claimed that the Constitution granted him absolute immunity in the election interference probe, to which Georgia's DA condemned this argument. We all know it's baloney, okay? It's a BS argument. But it is an argument nonetheless, and an argument that obviously somebody as biased and as compromised as Clarence Thomas is willing to sign off on, proving once again that his extreme actions will not stop until he is removed from that bench. There are many who are now saying that Clarence Thomas's actions are so vile that he must resign from office. Well, he's not. He's not going to resign from that Supreme Court position. He's going to have to be removed. And the only way to remove a justice is through the process of impeachment. Now, here's another irony, just for note. Every single court in the United States of America, including traffic court, all of the judges, they have a guided mandate or principles they must abide by. It's called judicial ethics. Guess what? One court in the United States of America has no judicial ethics code, the US Supreme Court. How ironic is that? Jeff, thoughts here.
Considering what we know about Ginni Thomas and her efforts to overturn the 2020 presidential election, how is this decision by Clarence Thomas not a conflict of interest? How come he couldn't recuse himself from a situation like this, considering everything we know going on behind the scene? So Dr. Richey, I'm glad you provided that education as far as the circuit courts and everything. And I'm just wondering, with this temporary stay, what the Senator Graham is going to do with this time as far as spinning lies and coming up with a narrative that's going to fit in order to get himself out of harm's way, because he should be in trouble for this situation, considering everything we know about Trump seeking Georgia in order to find, what was it, 11,000 votes? So this lifetime appointment is just feeling longer than it should. Like, it feels like forever in this situation. And yeah, I don't think there's any way that he's going, Clarence Thomas that is, I don't think there's any way he's going to step aside himself. He's not gonna resign. And he's not gonna be impeached either. So whatever we see coming down the road is gonna be here shortly.
Yeah, and this whole system of the Supreme Court, bad idea. It was a bad idea, a lifetime appointment, bad idea, all right?